Arcadian Vanguard presents The Wrestling News in your daily wrestling newscast for Wednesday, September 7th, 2022. Good morning, I'm Mike Sempervive. We begin with exclusive reporting regarding the locker room altercation that occurred during the AEW All Out press conference on Sunday night. With this report for The Wrestling News, here's Brian Last.
With details still emerging about the confrontation and altercation in CM Punk's locker room following AEW's All Out media scrum, The Wrestling News can exclusively report that backstage producer Ace Steel was not in the room when the incident began. We could report that CM Punk was in the room with Ace Steel's wife, who was watching Punk's dog, when Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and others entered the room. Ace Steel entered the room with AEW Vice President Pat Buck after the disturbance was noticed. Among those with AEW's Executive Vice Presidents upon entering CM Punk's locker room included Christopher Daniels, AEW's Manager of Talent Relations. Mega Parikh, AEW's Chief Legal Officer and an Executive Vice President, was also present for a portion of the altercation. Parikh was seen engaging in conversation with the Bucks shortly before they approached CM Punk's locker room, and was seen leaving the room with CM Punk's dog, seemingly taking him to safety. The Wrestling News can report that AEW has suspended several personnel who were in the room for the altercation between CM Punk and the Executive Vice Presidents. We can also report that well after the initial incident, Chris Jericho emerged and attempted to calm all parties down. And finally, The Wrestling News can report that CM Punk and Kenny Omega engaged in talks later in the night after the physical altercation, but the conversations are not believed to have been fruitful in alleviating the existing problems. For The Wrestling News, I'm Brian Last.
It's still not known exactly how the backstage brawl began, with Fightful Select, Wrestling Observer, and others reporting on conflicting accounts as to whether CM Punk threw the first punch or if Punk and Steel were defending themselves against Omega and the Bucks. The incident was reported to have gone on for approximately 6 minutes, and among those mentioned as having tried to intervene include Brandon Cutler, producer Pat Buck, and AEW Head of Talent Relations Christopher Daniels. The arguing between the two parties was said to continue after the physical fight had ended. Fightful's report also alluded to a great deal of backstage heat on CM Punk for the incident, with much of the locker room speaking against him while not officially going on the record. Punk suffered an injury at the show, according to Fightful Select, but it had not been confirmed whether the injury occurred during the backstage brawl or during his main event with Jon Moxley earlier on in the evening. Brian Alvarez of Wrestling Observer believes the injury took place during the match. There are conflicting reports over the severity and nature of the injury, although all reports point to it being an upper body injury of some kind. With regards to tonight's Dynamite from Buffalo, New York, none of the talent involved in the altercation is expected to be at the show, and Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley are among those not originally booked for the show, who were later added to help fill in. Creative for the show as of yesterday was said to be somewhat up in the air, with some talent and staff unsure of what their roles might be. In other AEW news, Malakai Black may be looking to take some time away from professional wrestling to deal with some personal issues, according to a report yesterday from PWI Insider's Mike Johnson. Johnson reported that Black removed himself from an indie booking on Friday's Northeast Wrestling show in Niles, Ohio, where he had been scheduled to face off against Matt Taven. There had been several reports of Black asking for his release from AEW. When questioned on the situation at the press conference on Sunday, Tony Khan refused to comment. Although it was not shown on the All Out pay-per-view broadcast, Black embraced his House of Black partners and bowed to the live crowd after their match on Sunday night. Some creative updates for several members of the WWE roster are being reported by PW Insider. The newly returned Braun Strowman will be featured as a babyface on the SmackDown brand. Strowman made his first WWE appearance in almost a year and a half Monday night on Raw. In a video released by WWE after the show went off the air, Strowman indicated he would be coming to SmackDown this Friday. Solo Sikoa is now officially a member of the Bloodline faction, and will be featured on the SmackDown brand alongside WWE Tag Champs The Usos and WWE Universal Champion Roman Reigns. Sikoa made his main roster debut last Saturday at Clash at the Castle, interfering to help Reigns in his title match against Drew McIntyre. Dexter Lumis has officially been added to the Raw roster. The former NXT talent reappeared on WWE TV in August after being gone from the company for nearly 4 months. And the Imperium duo of Giovanni Vinci and Ludwig Kaiser is now officially being listed as a tag team on the internal SmackDown roster. Kaiser had been appearing as a solo act alongside Imperium leader Gunther, while Vinci remained in NXT, but the trio was reunited at Clash at the Castle. Ciampa was featured Monday night on Raw with his full name of Tommaso Ciampa, the first time that's been done since his first name was officially removed last April. The new change was also reflected in Ciampa's listing on the roster page of WWE.com. Tommaso Ciampa joins Austin Theory and Matt Riddle among those who have had their full wrestling names restored since Paul Levesque became the head of WWE Creative at the end of July. In ratings news, last week's live edition of AEW Rampage, the go-home episode for All Out, saw a 12.53% increase in ratings from the previous week's pre-recorded show, drawing 485,000 viewers on TNT, according to Showbuzz Daily. The show scored a .16 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic, up 45.45% from the previous week, which drew a .11 according to WrestleNomics. The .16 rating translates to 209,000 viewers in the 18 to 49 age range. The show was ranked number 11 for the night on the cable Top 150, with the 18 to 49 demo up from number 22 the week before. Despite the jump for the week, the episode was still down 30.31% in overall ratings from the same week in 2021 and down 46.66% in the key demographic. Meanwhile, Friday's taped edition of SmackDown on Fox drew 2.077 million viewers, up slightly by 4.37% from the previous week's show, according to Showbuzz Daily. The Clash at the Castle go-home episode drew a .49 rating, totaling 639,000 viewers in the 18 to 49 demo, up 2.08% from the previous week, according to WrestleNomics. SmackDown came in at number 1 for the night on network TV in the 18 to 49 demo for the 8th straight week. The show was ranked number 4 in total viewership for the night on network TV, up from number 6 the previous week. Viewership was down 6.44% from the same week in 2021, but down 20.96% in the 18 to 49 demographic. Rapper Action Bronson is in training for an upcoming match at AEW Grand Slam from Arthur Ashe Stadium, according to a report in the Wrestling Observer. Bronson, whose song Chairman's Intent became the entrance theme music for Hook, was seen Sunday night at All Out, first at ringside during Hook's match against Angelo Parker, and then hitting the ring to make the save when Hook was jumped after the match by Parker and fellow Jericho Appreciation Society member Matt Menard. According to The Observer, Bronson, who is 38 years of age, is training with Hook for a match that would pit both of them against Menard and Parker. Whether Bronson has any plans to wrestle for AEW beyond that is not known. In Impact Wrestling, D'Lo Brown, who has been a producer and agent with Impact since 2019, has officially left the company, according to a report from PW Insider. They spoke with Impact Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore, who said, "We appreciate D'Lo's contributions to Impact over the last 3+ years. We wish him nothing but the best moving forward." No word on the reasons for Brown's departure. This was the third stint Brown had with the company after wrestling there and working behind the scenes from 2003 to 2004 and again in 2009. In Japan, New Japan ran the second of back-to-back shows at Korakuen Hall on Tuesday, which had been the first shows to feature audible audience participation since early 2020. In front of a super vacancy full house of 700 people, Kenta and El Phantasmo defeated Hiromu Takahashi and Shingo Takagi after Phantasmo pinned Shingo with a small package. The tour continues today in Mito Ibaraki. The scheduled main event is Kazuchika Okada, Hiroshi Tanahashi, and Tomoaki Honma against Jonah, Shane Haste, and Bad Dude Tito. And I just wanted to point out one correction before we leave the air with you today. Earlier in his report, Brian last noted an altercation happening which followed the AEW All Out Media Scrum. It should be noted the scrum was still transpiring when the alleged incident occurred. We apologize for the error. And finally, the wrestling news is now on Twitter. Follow @WrestlingNewsAV for Arcadian Vanguard's daily wrestling newscast, breaking news, and more. Once again, follow @WrestlingNewsAV on Twitter for the wrestling news. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we'll be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the wrestling news. The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.